Hello and welcome to another IG Live. This time we get to talk to Jyoti Rajan Gopal. And you probably know her from her many wonderful books. I was telling her that when we set up this IG Live for one of her new books, I realized I already knew her through her previous books, which I had already reviewed in the past. And she has written so many wonderful books. You can see some of them in the background. We have Sister Day. Sorry, the reflection is on there, but you can see American Desi. And we also have my Paati Saris and many, many others that I wasn't able to get them all in time. For example, Desert Queen, which is award-winning. She's written many award-winning books and has also, her books have made best of book lists from many different organizations. So it's a real pleasure to get to talk with her today. And for those of you who don't know, we do this every week, usually at this time, which is 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 Pacific. And we come on and get to share with you the story behind the story of some of your favorite books, picture books for kids, or sometimes we talk to authors of middle grade or young adult books. And it's all about uplifting diverse voices. Hello, and getting to let them talk about their work and for you to learn more about them. So it's a real pleasure to get to do this. Hold on just a minute and we'll get her on here for you. A different time, so watch out for that. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, so good to see you again.
Yeah. It's been so long.
I know. Well, why don't we jump right in and you can introduce yourself and tell us what was your journey to becoming an author?
Sure. So my name is Jyoti Rajan Gopal. I am a children's book author, picture books, and I never considered myself to be a writer or thought of becoming a writer growing up. Like that was never my dream. My mom said I was always going to be a teacher, but I sort of forayed and I thought I was going to be too for a while. And I sort of went off into thinking I was going to go into advertising for a while. That was not going to happen because I'm not that kind of person. And I did eventually become a kindergarten teacher, and that was my career for most of my working life. And I only started going into picture books, like thinking about writing picture books seriously around 2018. I had one picture book that I had written 14 years ago based on this story that I had discovered. My younger daughter was doing research on an historical figure, and I thought, oh, that's cool. I bet there's a picture book out there that I would love to share with my students. And I couldn't find it. And so my husband said to me, he said, why don't you write it? And I basically laughed in his face, and I was like, ha, 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 I'm not a writer. I'm like, no. And, I ended up getting stuck at home for 6 weeks because I broke my leg and I had nothing else. And I was like, oh, let me just like read and research. And so I did write a manuscript, but Leanna, like just researching the children's book industry at that time was so intimidating to me. I didn't even know where to start. I was full-time teaching. I was a mom to young kids. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not even going to worry about it. And so it was only in 2018 that I decided, let me go take a look at that manuscript and see if I didn't even know it was called a manuscript. I was just like, let me go take a look at that story and just see, what I can do. And that's when I really started diving into the world of KidLit publishing.
So did you ever publish that book?
No, I did not, even though I sent it out for professional reviews and it got great reviews. She gave me beautiful feedback. She was the one, Lola Schaefer was the one who started gave me the advice about the organizations to join and things I needed to do. She thought the manuscript was totally sellable, but I have yet to sell it.
How funny.
Right? In fact, the first 3 stories I wrote were all nonfiction. That's what I thought I was going to write, only nonfiction in narrative prose.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them sold recently, but the other 2 have not.
How funny. Yeah, and then I would say that I know you write nonfiction, but I probably most know you for fiction.
Yes, because as it turns out, once I started writing nonfiction and began to write, there was, I guess, some creative juice just opened, like something opened up and everything started to flow out. And I began to write in fiction as well. So that first picture book of mine, American Desi, was really based on a poem that I wrote for grown-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, I wrote a poem for grown-ups. It was not a great poem. It was not even a rhyming poem. It was just a free verse poem. But when I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, that's really not great. But I think the themes in that poem like sort of really resonated for me. And I was thinking about my daughters, and because I was also thinking of them when I wrote the poem. And so I worked on it, and it came out in rhyme, which I did not know that I could do. Also a surprise to me. I was like, wait, I can write in rhyme.
What a nice surprise. Better that than the opposite direction, where you find out you can't do it.
Indeed.
So tell to us about that, because that one, of course, has the theme about multiple identities and kids trying to navigate having more than one culture. And that's kind of a theme that comes up in a lot of your books about belonging, identity, community. So how do your books help kids kind of navigate that?
Well, growing up as a third culture kid, right? I didn't grow up in this country or in my own home country. I think as a third culture kid, that was like the natural part of like all of our lives growing up like that, third culture kids. I had to learn to straddle worlds. And in some ways, I think it was easier because there were other kids going through the same thing. But when I moved to America and had my daughters, I'm always going to be straddling identities and cultures. That's just who I am. It's challenging, but I also see it as a gift. And I think that is what I wanted to really bring into the conversation for my daughters when I had them here. And I realized like it's a very different experience being American and being another here in this country. And I saw that in my students. So I was hoping that through my books, I could offer some windows and mirrors about like really embracing and honoring those multiple identities that we belong to, like that, in fact, all of us belong to, right? Regardless of where you're from, and kind of honoring and accepting and seeing them as gifts, that possibility that you have of inhibiting more than one space.
Right. And what kind of reaction have you gotten from students or from kids when you read them these books?
Yeah, I think they really see themselves in it, even if they're not Desi, even if they're not South Asian. They'll tell me, "Oh my gosh, that's like me, my Greek. I do this in my Greek home. I eat Greek food, but I also do this, or these are the kind of clothes I like to wear, but I also like to do this." So I think they see themselves, regardless of what identities they straddle. I mean, we even talk about sometimes the boy-girl gender differences, and we talk about how you don't have to like girl things or like boy things. You could be right. You don't have to be in a box. So even those conversations have come up, which I thought were very, very cool.
Yeah, which leads right into my next question, because of course you're also known for Paati Saris. You have Desert Queen, which won a Stonewall Book Award honor. You have these very queer positive books, but as you say, it all kind of fits in with this idea of identity and like you said, not having to fit yourself into a box. But what do you hope kids take away from these books?
So both Desert Queen and My Paati Saris arose out of very personal experiences. So I met Queen Harish, who was the subject matter of Desert Queen. So I had the opportunity to meet her, and that meeting and watching her perform on stage was the inspiration for the picture book. This amazing person who did not live an easy life, but had such resilience and grit and such positivity and joy. And I was like, I want to capture that in the pages of a picture book, and to just share that joy and that feeling of comfort that Queen Harish had within herself. And I feel like and also remember, picture books are not just for children. Adults are reading the picture books to the children. And so a lot of my stories are also directed to the adults reading the book, because I feel like the elders in the community, whatever community you may be part of, also the Desi community can have some gentle redirection about how they might think about possibilities and, about the roles that we play, about how we can support each other in our different identities. And My Paati Saris, definitely, I was not thinking about it as a queer positive book, but I'm so glad. I mean, I feel like I hope that my books will resonate with all kinds of readers. So I wrote my Paati Saris because I knew I wanted to write a book about saris. I did not know what it was going to be about, whether it was going to be nonfiction or fiction. But when a moment happened in my kindergarten classroom with one of my students and my sari, that sort of brought me into the moment of like, oh, this is the story I want to tell. I want to tell a story about this little boy and how much he loves saris. And I wanted to remind our Desi community that we value like gender fluidity when the kids are young, and yet somehow we forget about it when they get older and start to get very rigid. So I really wanted to showcase a loving grandma, because yes, my grandma, I loved her so much. And she, she passed down her love of saris to me, as did my mom. And so it was sort of all entwined in that. And also I loved playing dress up with my brother when we were little kids in saris and other Indian clothes. And so all of those reasons were why I wrote these two books. And they happen to, again, I hope, help kids and their grown-ups about possibilities.
Well, one of my favorite moments in the book, and I think this is reflected in a lot of your books, is this moment when the boy comes out. Sorry, I think I'm not showing it. And he says, "They see me. They see me." And I think that is such a powerful moment, that they see him, like you said, see him, the possibilities, and see him for who he really is.
Yeah, and that's a very joyful scene.
Yes.
And that was important to both me and to the illustrator Art Twink, that it needed to be a joyful scene, and it was a celebratory moment, and it wasn't fraught or like, oh my God. It was just like, oh, here's this little child enjoying and playing dress up and just having the most fabulous time, and let's just honor and celebrate that.
Yeah, it's a very different tone than a lot of books, or those kinds of moments. Like you said, they're usually very fraught, or there's some kind of tension about it. And yet this was just very normal, very kind of matter of fact, very joyful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm also curious about your writing process, because you do have this very lyrical style. You have the book, The Lullaby, which is Love is Here with You. Or you have the one, I love, The Sister Day, about the two sisters learning to get along, because the writing in it is so different. It's so spare, and yet there's a lot of kind of like reflecting, where phrases are used at the beginning and then repeated at the end as they're kind of getting back into rhythm with each other. So what is your writing process like?
Oh my goodness. I wish I had like writing process. I think each of my stories goes through its own life, its own life. And I don't always know what is the voice going to be for the story as I'm thinking about it. So for Love is Here with You, I did know it was going to need to be in rhyme because it is based on an old Malayalam lullaby, and it was going to be a lullaby, and lullabies are, I believe lullabies need to be in rhyme. And so I knew it was gonna be in rhyme. And for that one, I actually spent a lot of time writing down all the words that I might want to include in the rhyming lullaby that would evoke the feelings that I wanted to evoke, which were those of like warmth and love and security and safety and feeling cherished. Like I wanted all of those words to kind of somehow be imbued in the lullaby. So I wrote down I made a long list to get myself into the mood of like, how do I write this? And then I just started to write. And I knew that I wanted to use Tamil endearments throughout, because that's how I speak to my daughters, how my parents speak with me. And I knew I wanted to incorporate the Hindu gods and goddesses. So I had all these layers I wanted to put in. So that was my process for that book. Like I was like, it has to be here. This has to be here. This has to be here. And here are all these beautiful, lush words. Now let's put them all together. And then I started the writing process. And because I knew that I wanted to evoke that feeling of love and cherishment, and I knew it was a good night, it was putting the baby to sleep, I was able to like put it all together. For Sister Day, it was a little harder. I am not formally trained in writing in any way, shape, or form, or formally trained as a poet. So I've been doing a lot of learning on the job, as it were. And so I would say I started learning about poetic forms? What are all the different ways that poets use structure to give them freedom? Um, and I had learned about this poem called Reverso, which I thought, oh my God, that is so cool. And I had wanted to write the story about my two daughters, which is who inspired this book, and about this arc of their day. And I thought, oh, that would be cool. You start off, as a reverso, and then you sort of end it that way. Yeah, and it wasn't working. Like, I wrote it that way. I loved it. We did submit it. An editor loved it. And then she said, hey, I want you to maybe not do the reverso. Let's use the same spare text, but maybe build it out a little bit more. And so that's how I ended up with the way it looks like now.
That's so funny, because when I read it, I thought it was a reverso poem. Then I went back and checked, and I thought, oh, actually, it's not. But it has that feel to it. I had that kind of impression that that's what it was. Yeah, it definitely began that way, but I don't think I really ever made it a true reverso, because there's like really clever elements to a reverso that I don't think my first version had. Which is maybe why the editor was like, let's I love the story, I love the spare text, let's work on it a little bit more. Did you find that it was harder to write also because of having so few words? Because I've heard other people say that sometimes that's more difficult when you have to kind of narrow it down so much. It can be harder, I think, because I had the structure of the story already in my mind, and I knew I wanted to start in the morning and end in the night, and then they're going to have a fight in the middle. I kind of knew where I needed to go. So having that spare text was actually easier for me. I was really able to pack a lot into the spare text. Definitely. I felt that I love that book. And you have a new book coming out, I think, in July, right? Over in the Mangroves. I do, over in the Mangroves, revealed for us. So tell us about that one, or what can you tell us? I don't know. Oh, I can tell you whatever. It's available for pre-order, so you can go get it now. I'm going to be at ALA this June, and we're signing copies of it. So it's going out, and it's like, everyone, please talk about it and share. It's published by Scholastic, illustrated by Dikshaa Pawaskar, who uses light beautifully on the pages. And so it's about the mangroves ecosystem that's nestles between India and Bangladesh. It's called the Sundarbans mangrove forest, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's huge, humongous, and I've always been fascinated with mangroves. I've traveled to quite a few, Florida, Dubai, India, and I've just been fascinated by the trees and how they kind of live this dual life, like right on the edge of like saltwater land and freshwater land, and they have to survive in really harsh conditions. But they're so important to the planet. They're kind of like they do so many things. And if you read my book, there's back matter that I put in the back, which basically was fun fact. The back matter is kind of written in a way that I was thinking of initially using for the main text. Oh, as a nonfiction. As a nonfiction, I was going to use some of the phrases in the back matter to actually anchor my main text. And then I changed completely because I was like, that's not working. But yeah, the mangroves are so important and so vital. And I wanted to share the importance of mangroves in general, but specifically because I'm from the South, the Indian subcontinent, the South Asian region, I wanted to highlight this amazing, beautiful mangrove forest. So it's accounting. Well, it's based on a nursery rhyme, you said? It is based on I believe it's 19th century nursery rhyme. I could be wrong, could be older. Yeah, that was created by Olivia Wordsworth. And it's very popular. It's well known out there. There's a lot of different versions, that people have used that I had forgotten about. I've used some with my kindergartners. But when I was looking for the structure for the story, and that's always my problem, Liana, is like, I need to figure out what the structure of the story is first before I can write it. Right. Otherwise, I'm just like blundering around with words, and like nothing is making sense, and I get very frustrated. But once I figured out the structure, once I saw the poem, and I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if this is going to work for mangroves. Right. I'm going to do it. It's a completely different take. It's about animals from, this part of the region. It's
It's a mangrove forest. No one knows about mangroves. They need to know about mangroves. Here we go.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What is the original nursery rhyme?
It's over in the meadows, I believe. Oh,
Oh,
it's over in the meadows. Turtle and her little turtle one, and it goes on like that. I can't remember all of it, but it's
I love that.
yeah. It's also about animals.
I see. I can see. I'll tell you're a kindergarten teacher. Well, and you saw your years of experience teaching. I'm sure you saw firsthand how important it was for kids to have access to diverse books in the classroom. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's you've just hit the nail. Like there's really nothing else to say except that is really important for kids to see themselves represented and for other kids who to see their friends and their fellow students represented. Um, because it's yes, we can live with stories that we don't have us in them. I certainly did growing up. There were no stories about Indian American kids. And I read a lot of Enid Blyton, right? And a lot of other white authors. Love them. Laura Ingalls Wilder, loved her. Saw myself in all of those stories.
Right.
But how magical it was to read R.K. Narayanan, and Arundhati Roy. And when I was older and be like, oh, wait, hello. That's kind of cool. My daughters definitely yearned for books about themselves. They didn't have any till they were in like fourth or fifth grade, when there were like a few middle grade novels with Indian American, not even Indian American, Indian kids. So I think, having taught for so many years, I know that students love it when they see their homes. They're like, that's like my home. That's like my mom, or that's what my grandma looks like. Like, it's just so exciting to them. And then if you start young and they're able to see these images when they're so young, they take pride in who they are. Then they're like, oh, this is who I am. I'm sharing with you. You're sharing with me.
Right.
And then there's no struggle when they get older to be like, I need to hide that part of me because I need to fit in somehow.
Right.
We have already as teachers helped them to embrace themselves, I hope. And then they feel proud of who they are. And straddling is always going to be there, but now it's like, yeah, it's just a fact of life. And that's pretty cool, is kind of how I want them to feel. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And something else I know that you do is you're a mentor for PB Rising Stars. Why is that important to you to help other aspiring authors?
So this is my first year as a mentor for the PB Rising Stars program, which, let me tell you, the founders of this program, oh my God, KidLit Pugh and Ebony Lynn Mudd, I don't know how they did it. And now it's Trinice and Layla who have taken over. The amount of work these women do to get all of us together and like coordinate all the applications or whatnot, I am just blown away. It's like a work of love indeed. But Leanna, when I started in this industry, there were authors who were so generous with their time and who were willing to talk with me about the industry, or who took the time to look at my stories and say, here's where I think, you could do this. Here's where I think, I love what you're doing here, but here's where so I am always trying to find ways to give back.
Right.
So I've been teaching this picture book writing class through the Writing Barn, and mentoring students that way. And this was a completely different, this is like an unpaid volunteer thing, which I've done with friends and other other writers, but this feels like it takes it a whole step up a notch. It's like a little bit more of a commitment. And I just felt like, if I'm being invited to do it, then I should just do it, because I hope I can help another author to at least figure out this industry the way that people help me to figure out this industry, because it can be pretty opaque. And yeah.
And you also wonder how many people were like you, how you were at the beginning, that had a great manuscript and thought, oh, this is just too much. I can't even figure out the business side of this. And so we're missing out on reading those books,
Correct. Because there's some kid out there waiting for that story, and because it's like you don't know what to do. You're just like, I'm going to shut the book, shut the computer and not.
In a drawer, and
Although I will say, I feel like all the people who are applying to the PB Rising Stars program, at least based on all the applications I saw, are just really doing the work. Good for them. Yay.
Great. That's
yeah.
great. Well,
unlike me. I was very clueless.
Well, tell it we just have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure you have a chance to plug your new books coming out.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to quickly take a cheat sheet because I have 4 books coming out over the next 2 years. So you mentioned Over in the Mangroves, but I also have The Power of Your Name coming out in August of this year. And that's an ABC book about, it goes from A to Z to how like all the different ways a name is a powerful, magical, wonderful thing. And again, this comes from my name being mangled throughout my life, my daughter's names being mangled, and people anglicizing them and we insisting absolutely not, because there's a story behind every name. So that's August. And then 2 next year one is called Arctic Adventure, A Tundra Tale, illustrated by Alexandra Mims Cook, coming from oh my god, FSG. Yes, FSG books. And that's it's a book about a mama fox and a baby fox and a mama human and a baby human, and how their lives intersect in the Arctic tundra. It's fun. The illustrations are amazing. That's actually the editor invited writers. They wanted a partner for Alexandra's illustrations, and so I was lucky enough to be able to work with her. So that's great. And then from Viking, another picture book biography about Indian boxer Mary Kom, who is the world champion, 6 times world boxing champion. Wow. And I am super excited that her book is also going to be out next year. And then I have This Land by illustrated by Baljinder Kaur. Magnificent Marys, illustrated by Tara Anand. And This Land is about Punjabi immigrants who came to America in the late 1800s, young Sikh men, and their journey of how they came to live in this land and how their immigrant story unfortunately continues to be the same immigrant story that we experience now with more recent immigrants. Like this, it feels like, oh my God, 200 plus years ago, things would have changed, but no, like that story will resonate for recent immigrants too, despite it being an 1890s story, and that's illustrated by Baljinder Kaur by Viking. And then the yellow is a mango, which is like a color, not really a color story, but a multi-sensorial color story, lyrical, illustrated by Sarthak Sinha with Candlewick. And that is a different way of looking at colors. That is not Western centric, and follows a family throughout their day as they explore colors in all its multi-sensorial glory.
Love that. And I love how you still have that teacher eye towards, okay, we're going to learn about colors. We're going to learn about feelings. Yes, that's wonderful.
Yes. I'm hoping all the books have lots of layers so that teachers can sort of hook into whichever part of it might, feel relevant for that particular day.
Well, we look forward to seeing them when they come out over the next couple of years. Thank you so much for talking with me today. This is such a delight to talk with you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for inviting me. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, and anybody who's joining us late, this will be up on Instagram in a few minutes, and later we will have the entire interview on our YouTube channel. So bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Rihanna.